Hey, y'all are still here. This is great. I don't know where else you'd hear stuff like this. I mean, so I'm going to ad lib for a couple things. I just think you need to be sensitive to the Spirit, what's going on, and what people are thinking about. So I want to talk about two things in this session. Of course, the topic is challenges to finishing well. But before I turn to anything that I want to say, and I may not have to say it at all, I love for a group to work together. By the way, I just think you ought to, watching all of this happen and listening to the conversations that are all going on, I think is the best thing to come out of this place. Because God works through you. He really does, through your unique perspective. And what He does out of this, I think is amazing. So, like Jesus often did, well, who do people say that I am? Well, what do you think about this? I mean, He loved to probe people and ask questions. So I want you to help me in this project. And if we need to go to the slides, I can do that too. So the topic here is challenges to finishing well. Bob was talking about this, challenges to finishing well financially, challenges to finishing well physically. I mean, there's a lot of things under this topic. You may want to come over. I don't know if you want to or not, but okay, good. So, will you help me? What are the challenges that you have experienced so far in life to finishing well? Or you've all watched your parents finish. You've watched other pastors finish. Carol's dad. I mean, you are an experienced group in finishing well. What the challenges are and what it takes. So, talk to me, and I'm going to be your scribe on the board, and I'm going to take a picture of it when it's all over and send it to Martin, and you can use it or whatever. Am I clear? You with me? Okay. I'm waiting for somebody. Lack of information. Just like Barry was talking about. So, let me pinpoint you just a bit. What information would you like? Oh, okay. Yeah, no, she said everything we've done today already. I'm serious. This is the value of this kind of ministry in a congregation. Because, if you don't hear it here, where will you hear it? You may hear it at some random place. Yeah, so, good, man. Thank you. Information, cover this stuff. Deal with, yes. Inflation. Well, Bob could speak to that one.
Physical health.
Inflation, physical health. Hang on, and then I'll come back. Okay, let's take inflation. What's your first name? I'm sorry. John. How would you talk in this congregation, this group? Now, most of you are from here, but there are other pastors from other places here. Envision a group like this. What would you say? You have some experts here. Bob's here. Where I think. Yeah. Well, right here. What would you say to each other? How would you encourage us? What avenues have each of you done, some of you, whatever, have done to face inflation, and how has it affected your spending? How about your thinking in life? Now, if you had those kinds of conversations, we could try it right here. In a sense, we may come back to that. But I think nothing can take the place of conversations like this. Same with physical health. Barry's wife, what she's going through. Just all kinds of. What are the? By the way, that's a good one for the moment. I'm going to take a parenthesis here. What are all the health challenges that you've experienced or that would come your way?
I would say navigating Medicare plans,
Yeah.
especially prescriptions. As a nurse, I'm not supposed to advise my patients, but I've had multiple times that I've patients got switched to something and I've advised them to fix it fast.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to advise them.
We had a conversation over the lunch hour about this very thing. And if a church had a seminar or a 2-hour break or whatever somewhere, and this was the only topic you talked about, how do we navigate this world? Because there's nobody really out there to help you. Most people have to figure it out by themselves.
There is SHIP though, and that's supposed to be a national program.
What is that?
SHIP, it's SHIP, state, let me look it up. Counselors are supposed to be available to everybody. I know the state of Iowa.
John, do you know anything about that?
Yes, we use that. It's like state health insurance.
By county, and they have counselors that help you do this.
But what if you brought one of those people in for a 2-hour seminar here at the church? I mean, I may as well hit 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 people at once, as opposed to each individual working that angle.
I'm not sure if they're allowed to speak from SHIP, but you could probably get social workers that would be willing to have those kind of sessions in a big group. And I'm not sure where the SHIP counselors, because it's state health insurance assistance program. You give them your health conditions, your medications, and they help you look at all the different programs. And that has to be individual. And I'm not sure where they decide where to meet with people.
Well, maybe you could work with Martin in developing something here. Yes.
This is a variation on going it alone. I'll have to explain what I mean. It's giving up at the end. I saw this in my dad, who was a businessman, church leader. My mom passed away, and he just went into a shell. His health was still good, and he basically, all of us, my siblings and I thought Dad just gave up, and it affected everything. And we just,
Wow.
my wife and I talked about that several times. How do we know we just won't give up?
Well, I want to go back to those 7 essentials. You know, who's helping you grow? What's your connections? Where you? I mean, just it all synergizes out of that. Those key things have to be in place, and your dad should have made, and you will. Knowing you want to finish well, you'll make all those decisions, and you'll have somebody encouraging you right to the very end. It's no guarantee, but you want to take the steps to do that. Excellent. Let's go back to physical stuff. What are the physical challenges you face? Arthritis. Golly, I don't want to talk about mine, but joint replacements. I'm there. I've got them in my body. Somebody else mentioned something. Hearing, caring, and hearing. By the way, excuse me, you changed your attire since this morning. You came in here in a 3-piece suit this morning. Thanks for being here. I love it. I love it. Who else? Diabetes. Gee. Heart issues. By the way, do you know in Ecclesiastes 12, there's a list of everything that happens to your body as you finish your years? Y'all aware of that? Ecclesiastes 12, 1 to 8. Seeing issues. My ophthalmologist told me I had a cataract 2 weeks ago and I was in to see him. Somebody laughed. That's okay, it's because you've had them. John?
Can I just steal 30 seconds?
Yes.
Cancer, that's the big one. I had gastric cancer a couple of years ago, and the fun meter kind of went down, you know what I mean? And I had treatment, radiation. What was interesting, and forgive me for taking 20 seconds, I changed my focus from the Lord to the disease, and everything revolved around that. All of a sudden, Interestingly enough, I wanted to hide it from my kids and from the church. And something changed. God got a hold of me one day during treatment. He said, it's not for you to hide. You know what? One of the grandkids asked me, Grandpa, I don't understand radiation. Isn't that the same stuff we use to bomb Hiroshima? I said, yeah, it's the same stuff, different dose. And so I got a chance to talk to her. And what I learned was this. Everybody's going to get something. And it's not that, what are you going to get? It's what you do with it. And I had to change my direction of faith. Once I decided that God was still in charge, man, it blew the lid off of the cancer. And, we said, okay, fine, we'll walk through it. But I've still got things to do. And that testimony, cancer.
That's good. Whatever we put on this list, God knew it before it got you. It doesn't surprise Him. Now, we can work at it through science and hopefully correct a lot of it. Treatment plans for it, and we grow. But, we meet every day through Jesus. Because He's the one that is in control of my destiny. He's in control of my life. He's a beautiful guy like Moses. I mean, we're beautiful people like Moses was. Yes?
Also dealing with death of family. I just lost my dog. But that comes into it too. The older you live, the more death you experience. From your family, from your friends, from your pets, you name it.
But again, we're not afraid of it. And that's the importance of, really, I want to say the first essential is growing. I never stop growing. Let me show you a little diagram that's been very helpful to me. There's a thing in mathematics called the sigmoid curve. And it justifies graphs and why they go up and down and things like that, according to geometry and things like that. So the sigmoid, and it's also used to help evaluate businesses today. They've taken something that works in the world of mathematics and they help analyze things. What it simply means is this: what goes up must come down. Things change in life. You always use this little cell phone as my illustration. I mean, the cell phones that came back in the late 80s were big, cumbersome things. You had to put something in your trunk or whatever. Well, right now they got a little gadget that sits in your pocket. Yeah, you're in a watch. I mean, so everything changes. So the technology changes. Your health changes. People die. There's all changes. So before the change happens, here's the key. You have to anticipate changes, and you have to start thinking about what changes you need to make before the change actually comes, so you can anticipate it and grow out of it into a whole new trajectory. And what life is a series of these. There are things like you do every day, and all these things are happening all the time. But if you're not growing, you're hung. You get stuck in the downward cycle of any one of these things. It's kind of like what Tim talked about this morning. Your relationship with God. You meet these changes. Some of them you can see coming. You can see aging coming. We've had a lot of conversations here today. How are you going to finish well? I mean, you've watched your dad. I've watched my parents. We watch people we love. We go to funerals. By the way, Ecclesiastes 7. The mind of the wise is in the house of the mourning, for therein is the end of every man, and the living takes it to heart. Actually, 7:1. A day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. You anticipate this, and Solomon, writing Ecclesiastes, he's jumping way ahead, trying to figure out the meaning of life. And he says, here it is, recognize it, and grow with it. So, and some of these are crash courses like a meteor. They come from nowhere. It's an auto wreck, it's a disease that you didn't see coming, and your world just crashes. And the question is, what are you going to do about that? Are you going to trust God and grow with it and take other people with you on your journey? And there's a lot of brilliantly written things out here in the world today. One of the things you can do in a group like this, Martin, is what are the 10 best books on whatever out there? Or what are the 10 best lectures you can hear? I listened to a guy out of Austin called Peter Attia, I think his name is, and he's a health nut. If you want to live to be a century, here's the kind of things you have to do. If you want to be able to lift your grandkids when you're 90 and play with them, here are the kinds of things. He's always thinking ahead. He's not a Christian, but it's brilliantly written stuff. I love to listen to him. So how to find all that information? Okay, back here.
Yes, I think there's a need for, as we age, our minds don't really recognize immediately the changes that take. So we stay on the same diet that isn't beneficial. We don't get the same rest. And we don't get, so I think there needs to be proactive information that helps us adjust diet, realize that what we're experiencing is normal in the aging process, but not to just give into, but I think diet's one of the big ones. And also, medication is a big issue. There's a lot of medicine thrown at a person with really a change in diet, change in exercise, change in mindset, learning how to wait on God, be quiet. I think all those things need to be.
Good stuff. So you got some healthcare professionals in here to help you in this, and we all have had experience in some of these things. Anything else you want to add to the challenges? Yes. Ugh. Loss of independence. Well, and that's why you want to keep thinking ahead all the time. You're anticipating what's happening. You're proactive. You're alert and looking at the trajectory of your life. And I really thought what Tim and Bob said in each of their sessions, the core is what's happening inside of you spiritually. What happens inside of you when this stuff happens? I mean, I've battled cancer and a number of things, but my deal is I want to keep growing. Until it stops me, I'm going to continue to interact with what God brings my way. And I want to do it aggressively and assertively and confidently, whatever it is. And I'm going to anticipate His work through others. Anything else you want to put up here? This is a good list, by the way. I'm going to take a picture of this. Billy.
A couple things. I think one would be family relationships. Just your kids, your
Yes.
your spouse. And another one is, it's kind of up there a little bit, but just money. How much should I spend? Where should I spend it? How should I spend it? How should I save it? Who do I give it away to?
Well, you got an expert right here who just spoke to us. He can help you. Good stuff, Bill. Yes, you got another one to add to the list? Dementia. Yeah, and Alzheimer's. Yeah, I just finished a group that I was leading this with, and there's a gal in the group who was in advanced stages of dementia. She could help in the conversations, and sometimes she couldn't. It's a new challenge for me in a group interaction like this to work on this stuff, but it was really good. Yeah, I seem to be forgetting more things than I would like to sometimes. Yes.
Technology, because just recently we heard a talk similar to Barry's about scams and artificial intelligence can do that the bad guys have, that they're way ahead of us sometimes.
Okay, I want to shift gears again. Anybody else dying to add one more on here before I switch gears? Mobility. Gee. I mean, it's a multitude of issues, isn't it?
That's what made my mother move out of her house, or made us want her to move out of our house. It was no longer safe.
Well, and
Stairs.
yeah, the thing that I encourage, the thing that drives me, I hope to be in the decision-making, leading the decision-making process about what I do when that season comes to me. It's not here yet. Unless I get some accident and, whatever. I mean, it changes your life real quick. But the aging process, I want to make my own decisions. I don't want my kids to have to make them. And if I could plead with you to do anything, I hope you have done the same, and don't make your kids bring this subject up. You ought to be the initiator of them and keep your kids current on everything that's going on in your life. And lead, that's what we've been talking about, generation to generation. It's my responsibility to tell my kids and communicate to them about who I am as a servant of Jesus, what I want him to do in my life, what I want him to do in their lives, and I'm the initiator. If somebody else has to initiate the problem, I'm not where I need to be. And God may use somebody to confront me and say, Habecker, pick it up, man. Did I see another hand? Okay, Bill, I want to do this same process. This comes up everywhere I go. So in family relationships, what do I do if my kids go off the rails? Or they become prodigals? Or whatever. And if I ask for a show, I could. How many people are in here who have people like that in your life? That's half of us. So here's where I want to go in this. What kind of advice would you give to each other in this process? What do you do in this? That's where you're at. You're the parent, you're the grandparent, you're the great-grandparent. You've watched your kids, you've watched your grandkids. Ruth Bell Graham, by the way, there are things written out here to really help me in messages. Ruth Graham Bell wrote a book about Franklin, parents of prodigals. He wrote a book about prodigals and those who love them is the exact title of the book. And it's a wonderful book about how she and Billy prayed for their kids, and William in particular. But that's me giving you advice. Talk to me. What would you do if you're encouraging somebody? Yes. Don't stop praying. It seems like it's a hard thing to do because we pray to see results. It's kind of like Crawford Loritz and that deal. You pray for generations you will never see. And I think that's a prayer. Yes, you do want them to come back in your lifetime, and sooner rather than later. But the test may be in how much you continue to trust God, because He answers prayers over generations, over centuries. A guy by the name of Dick Swenson has written a book. Well, his first book was Margin. He was a friend of mine in the Christian Medical Dental Society, a physician, and he did a deal on the words that Jesus spoke at Galilee are still spinning around in the universe. He verified that. He explained, I can't explain it to you now, but through science and the things that happen. There are things that happen that continue. The molecules you breathe, they go back in the air, who you are. And he used that as an illustration. God can answer your prayers any way He wishes. He can answer them backwards, He can answer them forward, but the point is to pray. What else? So, and make your problem an opportunity for God to do something about it. I'll give you a short story. Close friend of mine, he's a plastic surgeon in Dallas, Jay Burns. Jay and Jenny, they were in our church, very dear friends. They had a son who went off the rails. Ultimately, after they wrestled with this for 6-7 years, he started a ministry in his church called Prodigal. And they have a full-fledged ministry impacting hundreds and thousands of people, not only in Dallas and in their church. They go to the big Watermark Church, which is 18,000 people. So half or a third of people who have problems with their kids, you got 9,000 of them right there in the congregation. But anyways, he has developed a full-range ministry out of his own problem. And you can go online to watermark.org. and look up the ministry Prodigal with Jay and Jenny Burns. And they've been working at it now for 15, 20 years. Yes?
Keep the communication open if your child will allow it. Tell them where you, biblically, not in confrontation, but in just relational, loving way, where you disagree with their actions, but tell them you love
I agree with everything you said. I want to emphasize one thing. In my little book here, I'll tell you about it. In this blue book, I have a bibliography at the back of this, and this is the best book I have ever run into it on this issue. Jim Burns out on the West Coast, Doing Life with Your Adult Children. Keep your mouth shut and your welcome mat out. If you want to communicate, I mean, the more you do to disagree with your kids or to persuade them otherwise, is the more you do to drive them away.
I don't think you argue with them at all. You just reaffirm how you raised them, how you love them, your communication, your relationship with Christ, but you don't judge them.
I agree. It's all positive. That's my only emphasis. You know, and I have a very dear friend in Dallas. He lost 3 daughters through a divorce that's 25 years ago. His wife turned on him, and he has not had any opportunity to commute to his 3 daughters for the last 25 years. And they all have their families now. And still to this day, they will not let their dad speak back and have any kind of relationship with him. So, I mean, there's sometimes you honestly pray, and you don't know if God will answer it. You hope He does. You pray He does. You want to communicate. You want to keep your door open. Send as many things as they will allow you to send. I have another friend in Dallas. I just found this out 2 weeks ago. I had lunch together with him. His daughter moved back here from California with 3 kids, and she went AWOL years ago. And that's another whole story. But when she moved back, her dad went to her and said, I'm glad you're moving back. I want to still figure out how we can have a relationship together. She said, Dad, I would love that, but don't you dare proselyte any of my kids. She made it very clear. Now, he said, Hal, I can still talk about what God's doing in my life. I'm not after them at all. But he'll have to do that very sensitively. But how do you keep communication positively if they're open to it? And then how do you look for ways, but all the ways you can connect. I mean, I know people who have these kids have never opened their parents' birthday cards. They've sent them birthday cards year after year after year, but they've never opened them.
But the fact they get one says volumes.
Well, I don't know if it does to them. I mean, I don't know where it is. But yes, you do try and keep doing as much as you can. What else would you say? It asks a basic question here. Do you blame yourself for any of the problems? Well, in saying none of us are perfect, that's one thing. There may be things I would change if I reared my kids all over again. I think I would. And I like Romans 8:1. There's therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. I like to raise the question, Adam and Eve, they weren't perfect, as we found out. And they weren't perfect in their parenting. And they had one kid kill the other kid. And you chase through the Bible, the pictures of failures in the Bible. The big one for me is David. David was a tragic, tragic parent. He screwed all of his kids' lives up. But yet God still called him a man after my own heart. 1 Kings 1:6, Adonijah, who his son was, I'm going to be king. If my dad won't decide anything, I'm going to do it. And verse 6 says his dad had never confronted him at any time in his life. And then when he wanted to number Israel, he was insecure. He says, Joab, let's go number Israel. No, David, why do you need that? You're the king. So he numbered Israel, and God sent his death angel. And do you remember how many people died because God was really getting back after David? How many? 73,000 people died as a result of David's sin. How would you like to live that with your conscience? But knowing that God loved him, and David turned even to God and said, you have to do what you want to do. I worship you. And he did. And he went out and built his, altar on Aruna's field. When he bought it, that happened after that, right after that. God, I'm still going to worship you even though my life doesn't go well. So will I still worship? And that's one of the best things you can do. Don't give up setting your example. And how much you make it aware or how you communicate with it, find different ways to do it, but keep pressing on with Jesus, even through the harshest things of life. What else?
Mine goes along, it's exactly what you're saying, go deeper in your relationship with God. You're saying it already, but then also along with don't stop praying, I've got some prayer, partners who kind of bear me up in this, as some of our prodigal daughters. When they pray for me, and they lift me up, it reminds me of the paralytic being lifted up by his friends. Sometimes you can't bear the burden.
Yeah.
So when others pray for me,
Yeah. They lift you up. There are times, I think, when you go through life and you don't know what to do and you don't know how to do it. The pain is too deep. The tragedy is too heartfelt. I'm looking at my time. What time are we supposed to? I'm not looking at my time at all, Martin. 10 minutes, 3 o'clock. Okay. I still got. So, I love this. I mean, God has equipped you guys with so much to help each other. Yes.
Yeah, I would say look for small things. I'll give you an example. You have a daughter who has never denied the faith, but she's kind of walked away from the church, married an unbeliever. But when we visited them, we found that she was willing to let us take our grandson, junior high grandson, to church. We found a good church, and she was open and even excited about him to be involved in the youth group. And there's been a softening. And so you look for small things and say, how can we plug in with little smaller things to try to see if that Lord would use that.
Okay, I'm going to give you an illustration of something happened to my wife and me when my kids were 2. Jennifer, she was just 2 years old. We went to the pediatrician, have a checkup or whatever, and we got talking about disciplining your kids. And he gave me an illustration which I will never forget. Imagine this pulpit as a desk. He was sitting on one side, Vicki and I were sitting here. And he said, you remember kids, their whole frame of reference is concrete. So you have something sitting here you don't want them to touch, and you say, don't touch that. And of course, the next thing they do, they're touching it. And here's what happens. They don't know how to conceptualize, and this is true spiritually. I don't know how to conceptualize everything that God knows. So here's what he said. He took a little gadget, I don't remember what it was. He said, teach your kids, you can't touch it here, 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 you can't touch it here. And he went the whole way around his desk. It took him about 2 minutes to go around. And he said, do you get the idea? Just because you tell your kids once one thing, that they don't have the ability to conceptualize it. And isn't that the way we are with God? God has a mindset that's beyond anything we can imagine or think. So we're right here, but God says in a sense, you don't know the whole picture, Habecker. So look for small things. Where can you knock on your kids' lives? It even comes down to finances, Bob, what you were talking about in relationship to your kids. I mean, now that's something they will want to talk to you about. I mean, because everybody's concerned about what mom and dad have and what's going to happen to it. Not that you put any strings to it, but having those kinds of candid conversation with your kids about real life stuff that you would say, or they would say, has nothing to do with God. They'll open the door. Well, it's a nice opportunity to come in through the back door and talk about things and how you want to see them happen, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that you put conditions on it, but you might. I mean, that's an important thing in passing on the wealth of this generation to the next, because we're mature believers, and our kids may not be there yet, and they may be off the rails. So Ecclesiastes says this. What happens? A guy who is wealthy and he has to leave his money to his son, and he has no idea what his son's going to do with the money. Well, there's some shrewdness in thinking through these things. So how do I keep looking for the small things? I'll give you another illustration. I'll just never forget this. Howard Hendricks taught a class. It was his most famous class at Dallas Theological Seminary. It was a story called Agassiz and the Fish. And there was a scientist on the Harvard faculty who taught anatomy. And the way he always taught anatomy, he put a fish on this tray that everybody came into the class. And he said, I want you to take a sheet of paper and write down everything you see about this fish. That's all I want you to do. So people come out, I'm finished. He'd say, you're finished? You haven't even started to look at this fish. And they'd go home and they'd come back the next day. And the professor would say, well, what else did you see about this fish? And they did that for 3 days. Until people's eyes finally were opened and they started seeing all kinds of things about this fish, the way it was designed and the world it might lived in. And they dissected and saw how it had been put together for this kind. And they ended up with pages of observations about this fish, which they never would have done had he said, well, that's okay. It's kind of like a professor of mine used to say, God never puts his cookies on the lower shelf. It's Proverbs 2. They're always way up high, and you really have to work, and you really have to stretch. And I think that's the way it is, and that's where your conversations, well, what did you do? What else could we do? What kind of notes could we send? I don't know. My mother-in-law, I forget what the name was, she sent this little cartoons to Vicki and me, first 20 years we were married. Little cartoon, it's in the paper every day about how do you love somebody. Had nothing to do with the spiritual life. Just had something to do with love. She gave one of those to us every day we were married. That's another whole story I could tell you about how God changed their lives, but anyways, you get what I mean. There are things out there that you could make a long list of, and then double it, and then double that list, and just say, God, which one do you want me to pursue? Which one can I pursue? Make sense? Yes. Back.
Being active citizens. Paul said, I too am a citizen of Rome. He had the right as a Roman citizen to take a stand against evil. And I'm not sure that we do that enough as a Christian body, whether we sign petitions, present them to people, whether we go to meetings to stand for what's right, and that affects our children, it affects our society. And I heard people, I've seen it, where people don't like to have too much of a voting population coming against them, and they will make changes and adjustments accordingly. And we need to keep that in mind, that we can influence our society sometimes in a positive way.
I would agree with you. I want to take it a little bit different, though. The political world gives me all kinds of opportunities to talk to my kids about life and reality. Not just which politician I like. Who am I going to vote for in the election? No, that's not the real question. What do I think about the issues that are facing our country today? And what should Christians be doing? And if I had kids who were, and my 3 kids aren't at this area right now, which doesn't mean they won't ever be, but they're not there now. But if I did, what are things that I could talk with them about that have to do with the world in which they live in? And where could we share? Even talking about financial things like Bob talked about. You could say to your kids, there's some things financial I want to talk to you about. I want to encourage you with. I want you to listen to me. I'd like to listen to you, how you're doing this stuff. And the other thing it reminds me of is just ask as many questions as you can. Any questions that they'll let you. Because back to listening, I'm more interested in trying to listen to them and where their world is than anything else. So, Steve, I didn't even touch my slides for this section. It's the way life goes. But I enjoy, how you would talk about these. Is there a group here at the church that you could get together and brainstorm about this question, just like we have for this 30 minutes or whatever? Martin, or those of you in charge of OWLs, there's options we could pursue. Any final questions? Then I'm done for here. Okay, you got something next session?
Yeah, are we going to take a little break again?
Yes.